You're listening to the Valley Current.
Hey, Jack, you there?
I'm here, Jack. How are you?
Good hearing your voice. You sound chipper.
No, I'm doing good. Enjoying life. Good life.
You got a big trip coming up, don't you?
A big what?
Aren't you taking a big trip overseas?
Oh, yeah. We're going to Africa, taking our grandson, a 19-year-old grandson, for a safari.
Well, that's like a big deal, right?
Big deal, yeah.
And that's a super big deal. It's a super big flight. You're leaving from your hometown in Colorado, right?
Well, we're flying to Atlanta. He lives in Alabama. He's just 19-year-old.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we're going to meet up at their place, and then we'll fly out of Atlanta to London and then on to Johannesburg.
Wow. That sounds like such a brilliant thing. So I wanted to have you on the podcast because we met at MEA, but you have an interesting history that I learned, but maybe you could summarize, because didn't you start as a chaplain in the Army? Actually, you started a lot earlier than that, but tell us your story of kind of how you got to where you are today.
Well, I served for 25 years as a chaplain in the Air Force. We've got to keep that clear. Not
okay,
the Army.
Sorry. Yeah, that's important.
The Air Force. Right. Yeah. And I was the first Quaker chaplain in the Air Force, because Quakers aren't supposed to be in the military, but I've always been a bit of a rule breaker. So had a great run, got to serve all around the world a couple times, and then ran a nonprofit in DC after I retired, and for another 15 or so years, and then retired in 2014, actually, I guess.
Okay.
So we moved. My partner, Richard, is a hospice nurse, okay. And we moved from Atlanta to Denver, to Boulder, Colorado, in that area. We didn't know a soul. We said, let's move someplace where we think we'd love living. So we love living out here. We've been skiing out here. And so we got out here and I retired. I thought, well, what do I want to do when I grow up now? So I started volunteering. I started a little program with high school students to connect them, talking about the intergenerational piece, putting high school students in retirement communities with seniors to help them figure out how to use their computers and how to get on Facebook or get off Facebook, or how to get their photos organized and so forth. And we just found that the connection that happened between high school students and 80-some-year-olds was magical. The older adults just fell in love with these 14, 15-year-old kids, and the kids just adored hearing the stories of the elders. So I said to myself, I wonder what would happen if we bump it up to the university level. So it's a little difficult to get a new course started at the universities, but I didn't have any connection to CU, the university here in Boulder. I ran across somebody and suggested the thought and idea, and we pursued it, and we got the university to agree, and we worked for about a year on the curriculum. And so we're now in our 8th year, where we pair older adults who are we call them community members instead of old folks. They have to be at least 60 years old to apply. Okay. And our oldest so far is 87. Talked to a woman this morning, 84, who's filling out an application who wants to join the class. So we do, every fall we do a class now, and there's usually 40 to 50 years age difference between the student and the community member. And our basic philosophy and premise and teaching philosophy is mutual mentorship. So if an older person applies and we ask them why they're drawn to this, and they say, well, I've been doing this, that, or the other thing, and I've got all this wisdom and knowledge, I want to share it with the younger generation, we typically don't accept them. But when somebody writes and says, well, I'm really interested in this younger generation, I don't fully understand it, I'd like to learn, then those are the kind of people we want, who want to learn from the generation. And then once they earn the right to be heard, they share their stories, and the magic happens.
So it's really kind of a novel approach that you, in an entrepreneurial way, pulled together for a university that otherwise didn't really come up with the idea. It was your idea, right?
Well, I guess. We don't know of any other universities doing this. There are a lot of universities that have programs where you can go and audit a class.
Right.
But ours is not about auditing a class. It's about coming in as equals
Right.
and learning to listen to each other. And we center around the concept of the American dream. And so we explore subjects all around the American dream and how it differs from generation to generations. And it looks quite different for the 20-something-year-olds now than the 70 and 80-year-olds that we have in the classroom.
I think it's a marvelous thing because you're also giving the wisdom of the elders back to the younger generation, and you bumped it up, as you say, from the high school experiment to the college level. So that's kind of an interesting comparison too. I bet there's some interesting stuff that comes out of that.
For sure.
Maybe the college students are more appreciative, maybe the opposite. I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I imagine you have some data observations, right?
Yeah, we do. I think the richness that comes from the university level student, and it's an upper division writing class. So no matter what your major is at the university, you're required to take an upper division writing class to graduate. So this is one of many options they can take. And this is what we call a cross-cultural, intergenerational writing class. So it's not about the elders coming to share their wisdom. It's about elders coming to be equals in the intergenerational learning space to learn from each other.
Yeah. Do I have the right web page up that says teaching professor, teaching associate professor Eric Klinger?
Yeah. But we have a team of 6 volunteers who help recruit the community members, support them throughout. We do get-togethers with community members and students outside of class. One of the big things that happens, which is magical, I call it the magic sauce. Mm-hmm. One of the first big assignments is that the student and the community member interview each other. We give them prompts, and then they write a 4 to 6 page paper about the person they interviewed. So the community member interviews a student, writes a 4 to 6 page paper, and vice versa, the student writes. So this is unique in our culture to have somebody 40, 50 years difference in your age you're not related to, who will listen to you, hear you, understand you enough to write a 4 to 6 page paper about who you are, not just where you went to school, where you were born, all that, but when you failed, how did you bounce back?
Right. So it actually helps develop some interviewing skills.
Interviewing skills, but it also develops intimate relationships across generations. I just had a 78-year-old woman tell me this week that it was her birthday, and her student from 6 years ago showed up at her front door with flowers for her birthday.
Wow.
Because they've stayed in touch. And now this woman just completed her PhD, and they're family friends now. I mean, and we have stories after stories, even of how some students were on the verge of taking their own lives by suicide. And we had a student from Thailand that wrote to me and told me I would have not be here if it weren't for my community member who loved me and took me into her home and just accepted me.
So this is like a very unique aspect of the university that doesn't really get published very often, which is it's actually aiding a broader community.
Yes,
elders as well as students, and the students are getting some support and making connections with the community that could last a very long time. And the elders who get involved, and I imagine Richard is your partner, Richard Stansberry, is that the Gmail?
No, Richard Stansberry is one of our volunteers. Richard Smith is my partner. Yeah.
Okay. And so you see some of the emails that come in, it sounds like, where that's shared with you as to who the applicant is from the community.
Oh, yeah, we get all the applicants. And now next week, we'll be meeting with the applicants in a meet and greet. So they'll get to meet each other. We'll explain more of the class. We'll sort of get a sense of how they relate to each other before the final selection of who gets into the class. We normally have about twice as many people that want in the class as community members or elders as we can accept. So
do the community members over 60 years old, because that's a requirement, have to be born before 1962? at least
Correct.
on this notice. Now it would be probably 63 because we're in
Right.
2023. Do they pay anything for?
No, this is a class that doesn't cost us anything. It's amazing in this day and age. So the university has a program called service learning umbrella. And so they come in, and it's really good publicity for the university. And it's also good because these people tend to be donors afterwards because they know see what the university is doing.
You read my mind, because I think universities want to build mailing lists and in any way they can get people who feel as though they're getting value from a university. I mean, I'll give you kind of an example, right? I have an MBA from Columbia University in New York. They send me stuff all the time that's really kind of like, we want to take you to dinner, because we make donations to them and to other schools and business schools and law schools and the like for stuff that we think needs to be supported. But then I say, you're not really doing the kind of work that would be interesting. And here you guys are doing the kind of work that would be interesting. In my head, it's like the business school should take every one of their MBA graduates who have over 20 or 30 years of experience and tie them back to the first year MBA student who's trying to figure out, do I really need to get an MBA? Where's it going to lead? Make a connection like the connection you're making with college sophomores, juniors, seniors.
Juniors and seniors, actually.
Seniors. So make that connection and then see where it leads, because it probably will lead to a much richer network than just a pure donation type network that's just about money.
Or you get it right away, Jack. You're absolutely right. We had a federal judge, retired federal judge, who drove from Denver twice a week to come to this class, and he said he's now a believer, of course, and his conviction was that I can give here in a way that is a legacy gift in a way, because it empowers the students getting ready to go to graduate school. Some of these make connections professionally with them to contacts to get into graduate school. Another interesting spin that comes off of this is that the community members get so excited and benefit from it that they want to stick together afterwards. So there's a group that I've been meeting with now. They're all former community members. We've been meeting for 6 years, and we write 500-word essays once a month and read them to each other about our own development. And we're just going to self-publish a little book next month called Pips Speak, Previously Important People Speak. And all collections of sort of 500-word essays we've written about our journeys and about our life unfolding as elders.
I like the play on Pip Squeak by using Pips Speak. It's a nice double entendre trademark that you have there for your next nonprofit, maybe, that comes out of this, right? I mean, that's good. I like that. But when you look back at your journey, I guess you could see how one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. And what I'm interested in, when you were in the gap periods before the thing that led to the other, because there are always gaps, right? Yeah. There's never a perfect transition.
Right.
We talk about transitions a lot. And it's probably an understudied area. This whole area of executive transitions is probably to some degree understudied. All executives go through it. They get forced out of a job. They get forced out of an industry. An industry collapses. I mean, there are industries that have gone away over the period of time. Retail looks like it's going away as an industry. I know executives that spent their whole life at Macy's, and the Macy's stores don't need them anymore. So conceptually, their jobs really ended, or their careers ended, maybe at the right time. They're all getting pretty senior, as the industry looks like it might be ending. But tell me how you traverse that, because you've successfully been able to connect all these dots together, and that's like a fabulous thing, right?
Well, I don't know if we ever collect all the dots, but I've got a few of them dots that bring meaning in my life and give me a sense of purpose as, now 78 years old, and I was the oldest one, I guess, in our cohort of classes at MEA. Mm-hmm. But it's the same journey for all of us in a way. For me now, the purposeful life that Chip Conley talks about, I came to the point where I think I don't have my purpose anymore like I used to have. I know I don't. I mean, raised family, did a career, did the mortgage, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But now I'm just trying to use the purpose as a verb instead of a noun, and living purposefully. And so for me, it is growing and giving and living a joyful life with meaning. And I think that's the dots. And so how did I do that? How do I do that now? There was a guy out actually in California I went to years ago who had the Crystal Cathedral, Robert Schuller. I don't know if you ever remember hearing that name. He was a big international guy. He said his little focus was, he said, find a need and fill it.
Right.
That's simple.
It is that simple. And you saw the need. I mean, you went from the Air Force. I always think, whenever I think of Air Force, I somehow start thinking about the new Space Force. I don't know what it is in my head. It's like,
we stood that up when I was still in.
Yeah, we stood a chaplain in the Space Force. You have to be ready to like go to Mars or something. Like that's where my head goes. But Air Force, to the nonprofit you did, which we talked about at some length, because I thought what the booklets that the nonprofit did were quite interesting. And I guess that still exists, doesn't it? The nonprofit?
Oh, yeah.
What's the name of that again?
Well, it's a long name. It's called the National Conference on Ministry to the Armed Forces and Veterans Affairs Chaplaincy. So It represents all the religions that have chaplains in all the military branches and all the VA hospitals.
Right.
Yeah.
Because a Quaker being in the military is unique. I guess we had a chief, namely Nixon, who was a Quaker. And he was the commander in chief when he was the president of the United States, right?
Well, his mother was actually a better Quaker than he ever hoped to be.
That's interesting. That's probably a good discussion for another podcast another time.
Like many of our mothers were far better than we've ever become.
Right. And then you kind of connected all that to sort of your next mission, which was didn't you start another company too? A company that engaged in helping people deal with disputes. Am I remembering that other company that you did?
I don't think another company per se. No, I've never been I'm not much of a business person. I've just been more interested in service, I guess. And I've always
What am I thinking about that you handed those booklets out that involved...
the change cycle. Yeah. Change management. Yeah, we did write a book, worked with people that developed a thing called the change cycle, and people are interested, they can look at it, changecycle.com. It's based on how the brain accommodates change in predictable and sequential patterns. So there it is.
Yeah, right. Change cycle training. And I thought those books were really interesting books that to some degree I could see you were kind of a big architect or co-architect or co-creator of, right?
Well, no, the change cycle model was developed by a colleague of mine, Mary Ann Solano, and her partner, and we wrote a version of it for people going through divorce. I was divorced after 25 years of marriage, and so we created a model using the change cycle model for 6 stages, 6 ways to get through the bad times for good, we called it.
Right.
And it's based on and we've used it for cancer survivors, breast cancer. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought what you did was great. And I thought, basically lawyers could take those ideas and enable clients to see that whatever transition they're going through, they're going to get through it if they really understand the change cycle, which your little booklets really describe well. Well,
the interesting part is the brain works for us individually, but it also works in business and corporations and nationalities too. If you scroll down there, if you look even at 9/11, our experience as a nation, right here, the brain is the center of it, and the outside stage represents the experience of loss. The second was doubt, and it's like a traffic light. The first 2 stages of the 6th cycle stage stops us, or we don't function, we're paralyzed.
Right.
And then we move into the yellow traffic light, And some people hit the gas pedal and run through it. Others hit the stop sign, hit the brake and go back. And if they hit the brake too often, they hit this danger zone, and then they just repeat the pattern of self-defeating behavior over and over again, sometimes for months, sometimes for a lifetime.
Right.
But if they can transition to the next stage of discovery and move on into the green stage, the traffic light, then it goes forward. It's pretty remarkable. It's been proven. It's been in existence for 40 years, I think, and it's been translated in many different languages and used in corporations around the world, actually.
I mean, I want to say that most litigation, most of the time, even between companies, is very much about this cycle that's happening between competitors, between former partners, even between existing partners, where change is in process and somebody is trying to fight the change, right, and is resistant to it. And is the red and yellow are where all the litigation happens, and the green is really where the settlement, mediation, negotiation happens. And a lot of what litigation eventually has to do is move people into that green zone. That's what I came away with as you and I talked about this back.
Well, you're absolutely right, Jack. And in the first three stages is generally where people feel like a victim. And so right. In the litigation stage, they're still in the victim stage. And if they never get past that stage 3 of anxiety and confusion and unproductiveness, and they just get madder, and then they get resentful, and they get where they're doing things behind the scenes that tear things apart.
Right.
So we have books around this that deal with the personal change cycle as well as corporate change cycle. And there's some different dynamics that happen of how you navigate those stages or those, but it's basically the same of how the brain, whether it's personal or corporate brain or national brain, international.
I agree. And I have to say, and you've taken sort of that transition from that organization to what might be called the first experiment dealing with connecting elders or seniors with high schoolers. And now you've moved it to the college level with the benefit of the cooperation of the University of Colorado, which I think is brilliant. And I hope this actually expands in a marvelous way. I think this probably will be your biggest legacy, Jack. Well,
I guess I don't think of it that way, and maybe hopefully something happens. You probably are familiar with Kevin Kelly, who's helped start Wired magazine.
Right. Yeah.
I just got his new book today, and it's a book called Excellent Advice for Living: Wisdom I Wish I Had Known Earlier.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And he said the most important thing, a piece of advice he wishes, and this ties into everything we're talking about, is he said, I have a goal. If your goal in life is to be able to say on the day before you die that you fully became yourself.
Wow.
And I think my goal is not so much about what legacy I'm going to leave, is just how do I live so I'm fully authentically myself as best I can be, and try to give from the overflow of a cup instead of a cup half empty.
Yeah, it's like my cup is half full and brimming.
Yeah.
Half full and brimming. That's like a good line, which is you see the cup and it's actually just half full, but it appears to be brimming, and you're more than satisfied with what you have, and right. you don't need anything more, and you're happy with what you have. And that's kind of an interesting way to think about it.
Well, when we met at MEA, and I think MEA, it's just been such a refreshing, oh my gosh, experience, nearly magical in a way. But I remember meeting you, and you struck me as somebody who lives from the overflow of your full cup.
Well, I like to believe that. I say to myself, try to give a gift to someone new every day of the week if you can. You know, obviously, you should give your partner and your family members and so on, but even someone that is just a complete stranger and they seem to have a need, if you can sort of make it a bit of an effort to gift something to them, it might even just be kind of the time of day. It could be a very
That's
small
right.
thing.
Doesn't always have to be financial. Yeah.
It makes a difference. People notice attention and they appreciate it. I mean, look, I did some swimming yesterday, and didn't even think it was a great session, but there was a guy that was watching me, and I was flip turning in the pool. And I came out of the pool after about an hour, and he said, "Man, you have unbelievable form and beautiful stamina. I wish." And the guy was a pretty young guy, and he was pretty healthy, and he gave me a compliment. And I thought, man, I didn't feel like it was a good swim at all. And he was like, "I just wish I had a camera to take a picture of you, because I wish I could do what you did. And there's no way I could stay in the pool for an hour." I mean, he made my day with just 20 seconds of remarks. I mean, it was a wonderful statement. And I thought to myself, God, if I could have delivered that same 20 seconds to somebody, and they in turn deliver that 20 seconds to someone, we would have a world that would be far happier.
And the truth is, you do that almost without knowing it. I mean, that was my experience with you. Remember that wonderful conversation we had in one of the breakouts you and I did?
Right.
And I thought, gee, this guy's, he's got some stuff together there. And it's just wonderful to be in your presence, and Lee's too.
I feel the same way, Jack. And thanks for spending the time. I look forward to doing another session where you tell us more about how this university work is playing out. Hopefully, maybe we could even get a couple of people to talk about what it's done for them.
We could get a student and a community member to come in and talk to you.
I think it'd be a great example that maybe could replicate, because the one thing that's failing in Silicon Valley right now, and arguably failing nationally, is that there's not enough mentorship. And even where venture capital is supposed to exist to mentor entrepreneurs, the truth is that model is basically collapsing under the pressure to produce profitability. So the venture capitalists can't deliver as much time and service to the entrepreneurs. And that was a big part of what Silicon Valley was all about. When I came to Silicon Valley going on 40 years ago, it was very much about mentorship of younger entrepreneurs to help them grow businesses organically. It wasn't so much about money as it was about the mission and the vision of the future. And now there's a lot of financial pressure that's completely changed that game. And you are showing that, maybe there's a way to tie in people that are kind of over 60 that have more time and desire to help. And maybe that's a model that can come back to Silicon Valley in some form.
Well, we found in our program, like, for example, we have one of our community members was president of the Retired Faculty Association. Right. So we have faculty who come back in and sit as students now.
Well, that's good. That's good.
Well, so I could see in the business world, we've talked about it at the business school here to possibly do that, where you bring retired business people back in and sit in as a student with the class and redo the class with them together as an equal.
I think that's really smart, Jack. I look forward to talking with you again. Take care. Have a good afternoon. Thanks for spending the time. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Tune in next time on The Valley Current.